All right, guys. Today we're going to learn how to use Adobe Illustrator to make infographics. So what we're going to focus on today is really not how to use Illustrator, but how to really specifically use this charting tool in Illustrator. So to really take this to the next level, you probably would need to learn a little bit more about Adobe Illustrator. There's some great InDesign learning tutorials that can help you do that. So Illustrator is a graphics program in the Adobe Creative Suite. The one thing I did want to talk about Illustrator is the difference between Illustrator and Photoshop and why people use Illustrator instead of Photoshop. Um, Illustrator is what's called a vector graphic program, whereas Photoshop uses what are called pixels. So pixels are tiny little dots that create an image, whereas vectors are lines. So the images that you create in Illustrator are made of these lines called vectors instead of the dots called pixels. And the practical difference between that is that vector graphics are infinitely scalable, whereas pixel graphics are really like you create a pixel graphic at a certain size, it can never get bigger than that, right? It's always gonna, that's the biggest it can ever be. Whereas we can see if we create an object in Illustrator, it's what's called a vector, and it can be made bigger or smaller without really losing the resolution issues that you have with pixel graphics. So that's why people often use Illustrator to create logos, right? Because when you design a logo, you really never know where it's going to be used. It might be used to create store signage. It might be used on a billboard. It might be used any number of places. Um, so having that scalability that a vector gives you is always going to be better. Another advantage to vector graphics is that these days you can export what's called a scalable vector graphic out of Illustrator or any vector graphics program. And that's a format that can now be used online as well. A scalable vector graphic is a vector that's made of code. So you can save something as a scalable vector graphic, open it in a coding program, and insert it right into your HTML as raw code instead of bringing it into importing it in as an image. So graphics with Adobe Illustrator, the reason, it's Adobe Illustrator is sort of the default program for making static graphics. So that's graphics that don't have interactivity, that don't allow you to click on them, don't have any kind of animation. So the kind of infographics you see in newspapers and magazines, etc. And the reason that Illustrator is the default program for that is for two reasons. It's because it has this charting tool I'm going to show you guys, which allows you to make like mathematically correct infographics, right? You can insert your data in like a spreadsheet type format, and it pumps out a bar chart or a line chart that is mathematically correct. You don't have to draw it yourself. And then the second reason is that once Illustrator has created this infographic for you, you can use the Illustrator tools to literally make it look however you want, right? So when we make code with D3 or with C3 or with one of these graphics programs online like Data Wrapper, we're really at the mercy of either the program or our coding abilities. Whereas with Illustrator, the sky's really the limit. It's as you can do as much as your Illustrator skills sort of allow you to do, which means you can make really nice, beautiful, customized graphics. Okay, so today we're going to use a lot of the same data that I think we've used for some of our other tutorials, some of the data from Code Red, just to make some real simple Illustrator graphics. The first thing I'm going to pop up, and which I already have up here, is our CNS graphics template, which is, showed you guys this before, I believe, essentially just like a blank canvas with a little bit of dummy text, right? We've got a headline, byline, and a place for the source, and then, right, a nice blank space where we can create our graphic inside of it. So the template has lots of great things that allow us to jump right into graphics, right? It's got some colors for us to choose from, and it also has examples of what graphics should look like according to our style guide, right? So here's some bar charts, here's some maps, here's a line chart. And we can use this in a couple ways. You can really just start with one of these sample graphics and insert your own data, or you can create your own graphic from scratch and then sort of sample from these styles. So I created this really based on exactly what we used to use at the Sun, and it saved a lot of time. Like when you look at infographics in a newspaper or in a magazine, right, they all look exactly the same, right? They're all styled in the exact same way. And that isn't because some computer program outputs them all in the exact same way. It's because of the meticulousness of infographics designers and art directors making sure that every graphic that goes into a publication is styled exactly the same. And these kind of templates help make that a little easier. Okay, so I'm going to pop up some data here. So first we're going to make a bar chart. And we're going to use this data we've looked at before that shows hot weather deaths in Baltimore and in Maryland over a number of years. So we've just got, the years between 2012 and 2018, and then we've got how many hot weather deaths occurred in Baltimore and how many hot weather deaths occurred in Maryland as a whole. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that data out of my spreadsheet. And I will say, like, Illustrator is really not that hard to learn. I learned it from Linda tutorials sitting in a coffee shop, 20 years ago. And the tutorials are even better now. If you've used any Adobe program in the past, which I know all of you guys had, it's really not a huge leap. And in fact, in a lot of ways, Illustrator is a much easier program to pick up because there are less constraints in it. It really allows you to do virtually anything. And it allows you to just select objects and start working them. So anyway, the tool that we're going to use today is this charting tool. It's called the line graph tool in Illustrator. And it's Illustrator is one of the only graphics programs that have this tool, so it makes it really powerful. On the other hand, like, designers always complain because Adobe hasn't updated this tool in over 11 years. It's like literally exactly the same as it was 11 years ago. So it could also get better. So I'm just going to select that tool, and I'm just going to make a little box on my screen here where I want my infographic to go, and it's going to pop open this sort of spreadsheet-like interface where I can just paste my data. This is not a super flexible spreadsheet program. Like, you have to, it can be a little hinky as you move around within these boxes, so you kind of have to be careful. One thing, sort of the first thing you need to remember about making infographics in Illustrator is that it's going to try to chart like every single number it sees in here. So like if I hit the check mark, it's going to do like something really weird here. It's trying to make some line charts based on all three of the numbers that we put in. So that's not quite what we want. So I'm going to go back to the data here, and it's going to show me my data again. So any number that you don't want it to chart, you need to put quote marks around. So I'm going to go ahead and put quote marks around all of my years here. And this is one of the ways in which Illustrator is just really not flexible, in that, like, I can't use the arrow key to move around these characters. I have to use my mouse, and it's just a little clunky to select and to edit data. So oftentimes, you want to get your data in the best shape that you possibly can before bringing it into Illustrator, because this interface is really clunky. So you guys can watch me put these quote marks around here. Okay, and now we'll just hit this check mark, and it's going to give us something much more like what we were looking for, right? It's created a line for Maryland and a line for Baltimore. And in fact, it even made a little legend for us here that's falling outside of our canvas. And so you can always select. Right now, like, our infographic is one complete object. So we can, we've got these two select buttons in Illustrator, or select tools. We're going to use this first one here now, which selects the whole object, and the second one we'll use later allows us to select like little individual parts of the object. But we want to select the whole object, and if we right click on it, these three options here are what we have to deal with infographics: type, data, and design. And we'll really just be working in the type and the data options today. So data was that little spreadsheet interface that we saw a second ago, and for type, this is going to give us some options about what type of graphic we want to create, and then a few options for each of the types of graphics. So for this specific graphic, I want to make a column chart. And it's giving us some options like where we want the axis to be. We can change the widths of the columns. We can change some things about the value axis and how it breaks down the data. But for now, let's just hit OK. And we'll see this has created like a nice bar chart for us, right? So this is actually a really good start. So now that we've created our bar chart, we can really go about editing this, modifying it in any way that we want. So right now, I'm just going to go through the steps of making it look like our sample bar chart, which is over here somewhere. I think I'll follow the styles that we see here. But we could also, which we'll do later in this workshop, is we could also really, bring in different kinds of graphics, and we could draw different things. We'd really do whatever we want with it. That's sort of our Illustrator skills allow. The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm just going to fit this graphic into this space a little bit better. And I'm not going to worry too much about the legend right now because I'm going to move that later. But really what I want to do is just make this the bars fit inside of my, my canvas. And to do that, I need to use this scale tool right here. So you can't use free transform, you have to use scale. And scale is really weird because it's going to scale all of our text too, and it's going to make our text like disproportionate. So we're actually going to have to go through and fix that in a minute, which is no big deal, but kind of a pain. So it didn't do it too poorly there. Let me show you guys what I mean. Like if we wanted to make this a little not quite as high, right? You can see how it's really squishing the text. So ultimately, this is about the size I want my graphic to be, maybe a little smaller. And it's just made the text really janky, but we can fix that here in just a second. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my sample, and I'm going to drag this over a little bit closer to my canvas just so I can copy styles from it. Okay, so everything that we see here is completely editable, but it will take a little bit of selecting things in really specific ways to change the way that it looks, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we can just match all the bars. So we're going to use this select tool that allows us to select individual objects at a time. And so right now we want to select all the black bars. And there are some options in Illustrator that make it a little bit easier under select. Like there's this same, so we can select, we could say select same appearance, and Illustrator will try to guess what we're trying to select. You can select by the same fill color, you can look at fill and stroke. You can basically try to play with these options to get Illustrator to automatically select everything that you're trying to select. It's not really that big of a deal here because we only have 6 or 7 bars that we need to select, but let's see if we just hit say appearance. Yeah, see, it figured out exactly what I'm trying to select. And so now I can use the eyedropper tool and I can change all of those bars, my Baltimore bars. I'll make them this blue. Now I'll do the same thing with my gray bars, select same appearance, and I'll make them green. And so that eyedropper tool is literally copying the same style from whatever I click with it. So it made the bar green, it got rid of the stroke. That was pretty easy. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to actually try to get rid of all these little ticks here, which I think are, well, I mean, we could leave them. We don't really need them. It sort of depends on what your publication style is. Like for instance, in this graphic, we left the ticks there on the side, but I always get rid of 0 because it's always 0 down there, but I got rid of the tick sort of in between each bar, so maybe that's the track we'll take here too. Things are a little hinky, like here that line is overlapping with that bar, so we'll want to fix that a little bit. At any rate, let's just start out. One good thing to do in editing is to just get in really, really tight, because that'll let you select things a little bit easier. So I'll just select all these little guys here as well as I can. And I can just come over here and turn off the stroke on all those, and that sort of got rid of those. I'm going to do the same thing with the 0. Just hide that. Something's got to be done there. I may just sort of select all my bars as best I can. And the date. Just sort of nudge everything over. a few pixels. There we go. See, that's a little cleaner. Fine down there too. So yeah, so that looks a little bit better. So now I can start selecting like all of my type, right? So I can say select same appearance. Nope, that didn't work. So let's just select it all manually. And here's a nice trick: is I can like hold down Shift and just select everything like that. So I've got all my text selected, and now I can sample from my text down here, and it'll automatically sort of change that to the styling that I want. But this is a little wonky now, so I'm going to line these up a little bit better. Same thing with all these down here, right? Just making these little small corrections. Because the more you stylize something, the more little corrections you're going to make sure that everything is sort of lining up exactly the way that it should. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So now I've got these guys over here, which I want to actually see if I can bring over into my graphic. I'll just stylize them a little bit better, use some of these text styles. Maybe instead of those big rectangles, I want these guys to be more like squares. Let's see if I can use freeze transform for that. Nope. If I can use scale. There we go. Okay, it's really coming together, right? And now I can just take the various aspects of the template that need to be changed. Was that all uppercase? I think it was. Right, so for the text, for the headline, I've got a headline written over here. So key related deaths in Baltimore. Oh, doesn't look good. Man. Let's get rid of all of that. Probably don't want just that one word hanging out. And actually everything will fit in one line, so that's good. Okay, and now this graphic has sort of started to come together a little bit. Oops. Bring this down. Then ultimately we'd probably want to make this graphic a little bit smaller so we didn't have that white space up there. Change our source. Okay, and now we sort of created this nice bar chart, and we're able to choose all of our own colors and text styles and really decide exactly how we wanted it to look. I'll just delete the sample that we were working with. All right, I'll just go ahead and save this as so this is saving. I almost always save in the EPS format in Illustrator. There's a default or a native Illustrator file called .ai, which is like saving as a .psd in Photoshop, but EPS is a more flexible format and is still a vector format that allows you to edit, so that's just my default saving format in Illustrator. If you wanted to export this for use on the web, you could save it as a PNG, or if you wanted to export it for print, it has various print export options too. Okay, so I want to make a couple more. Actually, I want to make one more. I want to do a line chart, and then I want to take this graphic and I want to change it a little bit so that we're using an actual graphic element instead of these bars, which will show you how sort of Illustrator can really help make these graphics a little bit more interesting. So I'm just going to move this down here for the moment. Actually, yeah. So I'm just going to copy it. Okay, and I'll just get rid of the graphics. We're going to sort of start from scratch here. Okay, the way I'm going to do the next one is I'm going to start with the graphic that already exists, and we'll just change the data in it a little bit. So I'll just copy and paste this one over here. Okay, get rid of some of the stuff I don't need. Okay, so for this one, the data we're going to work with is this indoor-outdoor temperatures during the Baltimore heat wave. So we have, we're just going to use 1 day, 7/16. We've got it, the indoor heat index and the outdoor heat index in 4-hour increments. I'm just going to copy that for the entire day at 12 a.m., 4 a.m., 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. And I'll just go ahead and, so here I can right-click and select my graphic. Looks like I need to ungroup this a little bit. Let's see if I can. All right, that ought to do it. If I right-click, so we can see the data that's making up this graphic now, and I'm basically just going to paste my data over top of it. And I'm going to change it. I don't really need the date there since this is all one date. I'm just going to make it say 12 a.m. and 8 a.m. and etc. Okay, and with any luck, this is going to automatically create a nice little bar chart for us. Okay, so it did. You can see that these dots are still there, and that's because I drew those dots on by hand myself. They're just little objects. And in fact, we'll add those back in later. Oops. So I'm going to grab a few of those and just put them off to the side for us to reuse later. And I'm just going to grab the rest of them and delete them. Okay. We've got some little lines here that aren't doing us any good. So I'm just deleting some parts of the graphic that seem to just be sort of left over. All right. Oh, I see. So for some reason those are part of the line, but they're showing up a different color. So I can select those and just select this color, and that should fix that. Yeah, okay. Okay, so go ahead and move our temperatures here to the outside. Okay. Okay, so we've got a few things that came across a little weird, and that's because we started with a template that we're just having to clean up a little bit. And if we had started with not with the template and just drawn them from scratch, these things might have not come across as weird, but we'd have to change a lot more elements. So yeah, so this is coming across okay here, I would say. Just having to clean up things a little bit. That 60 over where I want it to be. Okay, so now things are sort of coming into focus. Okay, so we've got our graphic, right? And now couple things that I might do. I mean, if this will allow me to, if I go to type, it'll give me some options for my line chart to we can add a legend across the top. Let's see what that does. Didn't really do much there. So it'll give us some options of marking the data points, right? But like I hate the way that looks, right? That looks horrible. It puts these weird squares there. So I don't want that at all. So that's why I've drawn my own circles that I can put along the data points. And I'll basically just, zoom in and sort of copy and paste these throughout the document. So again, this is just another way to sort of customize your graphic, and I can put these guides wherever I want to sort of help me figure out exactly where things should be. So there should be one here, should be one here. Should be one there. Okay, right, so this one's in the wrong place. Should be one here. And here. I got them all. 12, 4, 8, 12, 4, 8. Okay, great. And so then I'll just do that same thing with my green ones here. Just try to get these in the right spot. So again, this is just sort of a customized way to add data points along my graphic. So that's a place where the data lines up, which is nice. Okay, so probably the last thing I want to do, I need to write in my headline and my source, but I want to make some kind of legend here that lets people know which one of these is indoor temperature and which one is outdoor temperature. And maybe for that, I'll just go ahead and reuse these dots that I already made. Just sort of copy and paste these, make them a little bigger. So let's see, which one starts higher if we look at our data? The indoor starts higher, which was kind of the point of this graphic, is that oftentimes during this heat wave, it was hotter inside than it was outside. So that means the blue, yeah, see these are kind of out of order. So I'll just type, right, indoor heat index, put that one next to my blue dot here. Outdoor. Okay, outdoor heat index. Just move that over a little bit. And we can always hide these guides so that we get a better idea of what our graphic will actually look like. Maybe in this case we want to sort of tuck our legend down here. Okay, now we can just add in our headline and our source. So we'll just use this for the headline. Why am I having such problems with inserting these headlines? Indoor and outdoor heat index during Baltimore heat wave, July 16, 2019. And we want to put in our new source right here, which is kind of a long source in this case. So I tried to make a little room for it there. Oops. I don't know why I'm having such a problem with copying and paste here today. So just for the, I'm just going to say Iowa State University. Okay, so there's another one, done pretty quick. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you guys today is how to take this bar chart and make it like a lot more interesting. And one way we can do that is by sort of using some sort of graphic element. So, you know, there's just like there's free stock image sites, there's also free stock vector sites. So any image that you bring into Illustrator, you're going to want to make sure that it's a vector image so that it's scalable in the same way. And so that's usually like line art or illustrations are typically done in vector. And this Vecteezy is like a free stock site. So I spent some time finding, you know, an illustration that I thought might work. So what I'm going to do basically, like I used to really like to do take a bar chart like this and replace the bars like with pencils, right? Because, you know, especially if it was about like school or something like that, that's a nice graphic choice that makes sense. So I don't think that really makes any sense with the with this particular topic. I'm going to delete this and just bring our bar chart back up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce this chart to just one line. So we're just looking at let's say Baltimore deaths, right? And for this case, we'll just get rid of all this stuff just so we have more room to play with. And then we're going to replace the bar with like a thermometer, right? Since it's about heat. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and get rid of all the Maryland data. And yes, I have to do this one cell at a time. Okay, so now we've got, you know, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different bars. We've got our little legend over here, which at this point is really not needed. Just hide that. Okay, so I've downloaded this graphic already. It was free. And the first thing I'm going to do is just open up these thermometers in Illustrator and grab the one that I want, which is this one, and I'm just going to just pull some of the stuff out of it, basically. So let's see if I can find this. I downloaded it yesterday to play with. Drag this over to Illustrator. There we go. So I'll just grab this thermometer, and I'm going to copy it. I'll go ahead and start a new document. I'll paste this in here. Just kind of try to size it into my document so it's a little easier to work with. Okay, so there's more here than I really need. Like for instance, I want to get rid of all these numbers, so I'm just going to try to go through and a lot of these like gradient overlays, I just really don't need them, so I'm just going to select them and delete them. Like for infographics, right, we're just looking for like some sort of simple representation, visual representation of our data. So a lot of these extra things that have been thrown into this illustration just aren't needed for us. I want something really simple, because you don't want to junk up your graphic making things cute, right? So okay, so this is fine. So I'm just going to copy this over into my my bar chart. I'll go ahead and paste it, and I'm basically just going to set this up in a way that yeah, that's actually fine, I think. So I'll show you guys what I'm going to do in just a second. I'm going to go ahead and get everything set up. Basically just going to, okay, so I'm going to bring down a guide here. Oops, we're hiding our guides right now. So guides, clear guides, and then we'll show our guides. So I'm going to bring down this guide just to make sure that everything lines up correctly. And I'm going to drag this over for each of my my bars here. And basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to have these all be the same size. and then I'm going to make a little red line that comes up to as high as the bar, right? So it's like the where the temperature is on the thermometer. If you're wondering if I think this is like the most brilliant conceptual graphic in the world, I do not. I was just looking for something sort of easy and simple that I could do to show you guys how to customize an infographic and make a bar chart a little bit more interesting in Illustrator. So this shouldn't be too hard here. Looks like we lost some of our numbers over on the side. We can add those back. Oh, there they are. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now is there's this nice arrange feature in Illustrator where if you select a bunch of objects, it'll distribute them for you in sort of even ways. So it's like called align, so distribute objects. So I can distribute all those equally by their center because I didn't do a great job of copying and pasting them. And now I'm going to bring the transparency on them down quite a bit, and I can see where the bars should be underneath. All right, now I'm going to draw just like a red line. Increase the stroke a little bit up to like 3 or 4. Zoom in for this. And I'm basically just going to, actually let's do another guide here down to the bottom, so I know where to start. Okay. And I'm just going to draw this red line that comes up to the top. Right, and the idea is that each bar is like a little temperature line. And we'll get rid of those blue bars in a second, and this will make a lot more sense then. That one doesn't have one. Okay. All right, so a few things we want to do now. This is basically done. We just need to like clean it up a little bit so you can actually see what's going on. So the first thing I'll do is, so let's just grab all of these guys here, and I'm going to do something called send to back. So I'm going to go object, arrange. Oh, it's not letting me do it for some reason. All right. Object, arrange, send to back. So then I can delete the, oops. Oh, okay, so the first thing I need to do here is I need to, so right now this infographic is all like one thing, and Illustrator won't really let you like edit individual parts of it without selecting the whole. So if I go to ungroup, it's saying, you know, if you ungroup this, it's gonna pull apart the graph. Are you sure you want to do that? And I do, and the danger here is that like if I wanted to change the numbers in my graph, I wouldn't be able to do it after I ungroup everything. But I need to do that to be able to delete some of these bars here. Okay, so now this is really coming together. And the last thing I want to do is I want to draw like a white box that covers up the bottom of all these guys here so that we don't see all this stuff down here, right? And now I can arrange, send backwards. Interesting. We're on different layers here. Okay, and so now we've got sort of our graphic. Maybe we want to need to put our ears back. This is where these distribute and align tools come in really handy because like I don't have to be too careful about how I copied and pasted all those years over, because in a minute after I select them all, or after I change them all and then select them, I can align them really easily. So yeah, I can just sort of then I can say like align them all via the center and then distribute them, you know, sort of based on their center line or their right line. Grab all this text here and make sure that that matches these. Oops. Okay, now we've transformed that bar chart into something a little bit more interesting using these thermometer graphics. So obviously we'd want to add our headline and our chatter back up here, and we could use this instead of just using sort of a more boring bar chart. So that is pretty much all I've got. I wanted to mention there is a really nice Lynda video, or LinkedIn Learning video called Illustrator Infographics, which will walk you through how to do what I just showed you in much more detail and really give you some more tips about how to use Illustrator to make these graphics look really cool. There's also a great Illustrator Essentials tutorial on Lynda, which is how I learned to use Illustrator originally. And I also wanted to show this DVD that I have by the great Alberto Cairo called Creating Maps, Charts, and Infographics with Adobe Illustrator, which is like 8 hours long and taught by Alberto Cairo when he was much younger. And it's really excellent. I always have it on my desk if anybody ever wants to watch it. So any questions? Thank you very much, guys.